Hi, Dr. Monroe.
Yeah, how are you, sir?
Doing well, thank you. How are you?
Beautiful day here in North Carolina.
Good. Happy to hear that. Same here in Houston. Appreciate you coming on.
Looking forward to a good conversation.
Okay, great. All right. Dr. Monroe, you're the superintendent for the Diocese of Charlotte. What does a superintendent do?
So we carry forth the mission of the church. Specifically, we are hands of the bishop, and we help him shepherd his flock. So most superintendents they wear a couple of hats. If there are diocesan schools, the Catholic schools office that they oversee may oversee the diocesan schools that are not parochial schools. If it's a parochial school, that chief administrator is, of course, the pastor. So we have a variety of different schools in our school system. We have 20 schools, around 8,200 kids across Western North Carolina. And so um, we're unique in that we have a mini school system of 9 schools in Charlotte that's administrated by myself and our office. So we're the chief administrators. And then we work hand in hand with our good pastors at the other parochial schools outside of Charlotte proper as consultants, as advisors, as people on mission with them. So uh, for some places we work more directly with the administrators and the teachers. For the other schools, we help walk alongside them and help them continue to improve and continue to live out the mission.
What is the mission and what is your vision for the diocese?
So when we're onboarding new teachers, and we recognize that we do this for new families as well, we say Catholic education exists for 2 reasons. The first reason, of course, is to share the good news of the gospel, to evangelize. And so that is the primary reason that the church set up Catholic schools, to shepherd the flock, to be an opportunity for those that are in different places in their faith journey to come to know, love, and serve Christ. The other reason Catholic education was set up, Catholic schools were set up, was to be a tool for parents, to be a resource for them because they're the primary educators of their children. So for those parents to assist them in that formation of their children. We can never replace parents, but it's our great honor to walk hand in hand with them as they continue to uh, help guide and form their souls and their minds towards their ultimate vocation and ultimately eternal life.
Curious to know what you'd like to accomplish in your tenure there as superintendent.
So when we look at the history of Catholic education around the world, here in the United States, uh, especially as more and more lay leadership take over the reins of Catholic schools, there needs to be an intentionality towards focusing on formation, not just for immediate successes, but ultimately that eternal life, as I just mentioned that relationship with Jesus Christ. So I've been fortunate to be the superintendent in Charlotte now for 5 years. And when we came on board, we said, we need to make sure first things stay first things. There's no magic bullet when it comes to creating an authentically Catholic school, but there is a secret sauce. And that sauce is keeping ourselves focused on Jesus Christ as the source and summit of everything that we do. So what we've really tried to do, and I think we continue to move in a good direction, is recognize that for us, if you don't keep that Catholic identity first and foremost, all those other things that you want to accomplish, the academics, the co-curriculars, the fine arts, athletics, none of them will be all those, I like to call them lesser goods. None of them will flourish as excellently as if you did not keep Christ at the center of everything. So it's something that we've really tried to reorient on. We've seen some great successes. I can talk about some of the programs and things that we've rolled out, but I think there's a true sense in our diocese of recognizing that without our Catholic culture, without our Catholic identity, there's no reason for our schools to exist. And by focusing on that, it is a both and, where you keep Jesus at the center of everything, and all those other things you wish to do, working alongside our parents, will be will be sought excellently.
Yeah, let's hear the successes.
So as we look at the successes, there's a lot of different metrics you can look at when it comes to a Catholic school. Lots of times, if you're looking at just operational vitality, people will look at enrollment numbers, they'll look at alternative income streams that are coming in. But for us, those are only one pinpoint of success. That's not going to be the true success of what we're doing. Enrollment is good because if we're doing the right things and creating things that are good, that are true, that are beautiful, people will be attracted to that and want to join our mission. But more importantly, it's what does it look like for our graduates as they go up to and through our system? Are they not just learning the faith up here, but are they building that relationship with Christ such that when the time comes for them to leave our schools, when they go off to college, they'll continue to participate in groups with focus or those Newman centers, and then continue to raise as they find their vocations, whether it's in the married life or the religious life, they will continue to take those lessons learned during the school, reinforced by the family, and stay active in their faith. So more fortunate, we've started capturing the numbers of how many people come into the church. So last year, for example, I think we had 56 students come into the faith in our schools. That's, again, not we don't have a quota to fill. But again, if we're doing the right things, continuing to talk about joy and the cardinal virtues and theological virtues, if we continue to do that, that will be so attractive that kids and their families will want to join our church. And so we think those sorts of metrics speak to the success of our mission. And then there are other metrics as well. If we are pursuing excellence in all things, if we are keeping Christ, who is perfect, at the center of everything we do and seeking that perfection, then we will necessarily excel in those shorter term goods, the good high schools, the good colleges, the good careers. And those kids will be successful, yes, in this life, but more so in the next.
What are the biggest challenges to carrying out your mission?
I think there's a few. Uh, when we look at who we are a community of families. We're a community of educators that come from different walks of life. We say, there's no such thing as a perfect Christian, a perfect Catholic. We're all saints in the making. So when we all come together in a community, we recognize that people are in different places in their faith journey. And so that can be a challenge sometimes for people to understand, well, what does that mean for me personally? What are the expectations for me as an educator or us as a family when it comes to participating in the life of the church through Catholic education? And so that can be intimidating for some. It can be a challenge if people are well-intentioned but not well-formed in the teachings of the church. And so we've tried to address that by setting expectations right from the get-go, saying that families, we want you to sign our parent and school covenant because that outlines clearly, one, what we promise as a Catholic school to provide to you as the primary educators of your children, but then conversely, what we need from you as a family in order to be successful in our mission. So that means, parents, we need you to ensure that your kids are getting to the sacraments. We want to ensure that you are abiding by the precepts of the church. We want to ensure that those lessons that your kids are learning about Christ, as well as all the other academic and everything else that they're learning, those lessons are being reinforced at home and on the weekends. Because, as you know, as all the research shows, it doesn't matter how much good we do during the school day, kids tend to follow in the footsteps of their parents. And so we need that partnership with those parents, knowing that they are going to follow the example that they see after school hours and on the weekend. So we set expectations for the families. For our teachers and educators, we clearly articulate right from the get-go in the teacher boot camp that we have all of our educators go through. We say, look, it doesn't matter what position you have in our schools, whether you're the janitor, the science teacher, the principal, regardless of where you are, there's an expectation, an obligation, and responsibility that you are going to witness the gospel to your kids day in and day out. That you are not just a teacher. In fact, our contracts say teacher minister because they are ministering in the way they teach, the Catholic worldview they take on, and the way that they have those sidebar conversations in the hallways with those kids. So for us, the challenges would be people not understanding what that looks like. And we're saying we don't have to be perfect at it, but we need an openness to that recognition that if we don't keep Christ at the center of all things, all those other things we seek to do will fall by the wayside.
Well, it's an impressive vision, and it's quite different from my own personal experience having gone to parochial school. So, I mean, I'm genuinely pleased with your education and ability to articulate the goal. So, in my experience, there's a couple challenges with parochial education. One is just very low budget. So we have teachers who they don't get paid very much, so they're probably not the primary breadwinner. Oftentimes, it's going to be an older woman who's not going to understand how boys work, and then you see how the negative impact that has on boys in education, and then also lack of the intellectual formation, lack of parent buy-in. You've addressed that, so I imagine that some of these challenges are shared in your diocese. How do you address those?
So going back to living wage and attracting the best and brightest talent, I guess that those that want to come and make a career out of this, that is absolutely a challenge. Um, I would say in general, education itself is downplayed in favor of more utilitarian careers in the United States, and that is unfortunately that's a hallmark of our society as we continue to prioritize worldly things and not things of higher order. Uh, it's getting more and more difficult to find people that recognize the value of forming the next generation in this educational way. And there's this tricky balancing act of if we say we're Catholic schools, we're not private schools, and if we're Catholic schools, that means we should be accessible to all who want to join our mission and subscribe to our mission. So there's a monetary cost there, and most of our budget is taken up by teacher salaries. So you have this juggling act of if you charge too much in order to pay your teachers more, you price yourself out of the range of those good families that want to join, and then you're catering to just a small select few. And on the flip side, if you don't pay your teachers well enough, then um, you will, as you mentioned, you'll get people that maybe this wasn't their primary vocation, or maybe um, they can't afford to really embed into what it means to be a Catholic educator because they're raising a growing family. So that is absolutely something that the church will continue to need to address, especially, I would argue, this out of all the ministries of the church, and Catholic education is very much a ministry or should be viewed as such. If it's a ministry of the church, we need to ensure that it's not seen as a profit maker, that it's not seen as something that isn't invested into by parishioners and the church at large. So there's that. The other thing is, are we building up alternative revenue streams to offset that cost of education? And so are we building up endowments? Are we looking at annual funds? That's one of the things that we have done. One of our four pillars in our office is committed operational vitality, where it's accessible to all while sustainable for the future. And so we do have endowments, we do have annual funds. We have a director of development for Catholic schools, and their goal and one of their objectives is how do you ensure that our schools can remain viable while not pricing ourselves out of the range of those kind of families. Catholic schools, we're at a very interesting place in our history, going from the high watermark 1986, where we had tons of Catholic schools and tons of kids in schools, to this place where um, people aren't necessarily seeing the value of Catholic education in quite the same way. And I would argue that's because we haven't always prioritized our mission. Maybe we have really well-intentioned people, but aren't as well formed as to why we need to keep that Catholic identity first. And when you don't keep that first, other things rise to the top. Athletics, um, this idea of a private school, academics outside of religion class being seen as more important than religion class, not understanding what it means to teach through the lens of a Catholic school. And when that happens, you just start to go down this road of we're a private school, and there's a whole host of challenges that arise from that. And it's part of the reason why we've seen the pendulum swing towards other other forms of schooling, whether it's homeschooling or the rise of classical academies, other liberal arts models. And I understand why that is, but I also think that it's good parents have options, but it also should be a learning lesson for us that are leaders in Catholic education to say, how do we get back to being first and foremost a ministry of the church?
And so much of that is also the spiritual formation of the faculty and staff. Um, I definitely witnessed teachers without that spiritual formation or moral rectitude. And I can only think that in large part it's due to the fallout of the crisis in the church after Vatican II, which the good news about that is those people are largely dying out. So is that something you've observed too, that the younger generation is more pious and well informed?
There's definitely a fervor that we see there. We say Monsignor Shea has a great book from Christendom to Apostolic Mission, where he talks about how we are living in this post-Christian time in many places. N- That environment in and of itself forms people that are forged to go out and evangelize like the apostles of old. And the people that are being called to serve as leaders in the church during this time, they aren't going into the industry with this idea that it's going to be a cozy, comfortable job. They're going in knowing that they have to be on fire for Christ, that they have to um, lead with mission first, that they have to um, show compassion without compromising. And so I do think a lot of the younger priests and chaplains that are coming up the ranks, and we're seeing many of them that understand that this is hugely important to the future of the church to educate kids, not just in the tenets of the faith, but an understanding of why those tenets exist. And then help them to understand too that it's not enough to just know the faith, they have to live it.
You seem like a young guy. You're in a pretty important position. How did you get there?
So I was had an interesting journey. I went to Christendom College for my undergrad,
Yeah,
and
man, I could smell the liberal arts on you.
so had good company there. And after graduation, I thought I was going into business. Landed in LA for a bit. Spent some time living with some Thomas Aquinas grads. Had a excellent time uh, building up some good fraternity out there. Um, and long story short, ended up teaching out a ranch in Colorado. So I was did the farmhand thing for a bit. Had a number of head of cattle that I was responsible for, building fence line, and spent some time there. And that was a really good opportunity to reflect on where am I going in my life and my vocation. And had a chance to do some tutoring on the side during that time, and before that, working for the Los Angeles Diocese. And it started sending out interviews to different dioceses because I really felt called to go into the teaching profession. Ended up in the Arlington Diocese, followed, had some good friends out there. And so taught K to 8 for a bit, went up to the high school level, went back to Christendom, and was there as a director. And then I was called to help build up and turn around a school down in Tallahassee, Florida. So went down there with my new wife and enjoyed our time there. We were able to do some great things at John Paul the Great down in Florida. And then said yes to God when we were called up to Omaha, Nebraska, to their central office to help with their 72 Catholic schools. And during this whole time, we were trying to get back closer to the East Coast. I'm from Ohio. My wife is from upstate New York. And we heard that Charlotte was an incredibly solid and just energizing, faithful diocese. And we landed here 5 years ago, and it's been fantastic. Wonderful priests, wonderful church leadership. It's a beautiful nexus of Belmont Ivy College, Tan Books, the Catholic Company. So you have this little microcosm of intentional Catholicism. And so the support here, the families you've met here have been incredible. So that's how we landed here. As my wife told me, she said, we are not moving. We are embedded here. And with four young ones, 6, 4, 2, and 5 months, we're going to be here
Congrats.
for a while.
What would you say are the characteristics of a good superintendent?
First and foremost, you have to recognize what Catholic education is and what it's meant to be, and how, if we are truly countercultural, we're not afraid to speak that mission boldly and recognize that all of our educators, our job is to help form them just as they're helping form their teachers, just as they're helping form their students and working alongside families. Our job is to help them understand what it means to, as the rabbis would say when they called their students, to say, come follow me, to take on my worldview, to yeah, walk, walk in my shoes, to shake the dust from our feet. And so um, I think a quality of a good superintendent is someone who recognizes that as Catholic schools, if we are maintaining the status quo, if we are not living boldly, then we're flatlining. And if you're flatlining, we're dying. And we're in an age where we need to be boldly Catholic, proud of who we are, and that should permeate everything that we do. And that starts with helping find, identify, and train up good leadership, but then also clarifying those expectations for all who come to our schools. There are other things too. You need to be able to communicate well, articulate well the mission. You need to be able to find and resource good resources and books to put in student hands. Um, you also have to be willing to really work closely with the ordinary. As a hierarchical church, our job is to work closely alongside our bishop and make sure that his vision for the schools, which it really isn't his vision, it's Christ's vision and mission for the schools, that we are an instrument to that. So I've seen some Catholic school offices that just kind of coast and maintain the status quo. I've seen some great visionary Catholic school offices that are moving the schools in a good direction. And it's all about how do we take the very best of our tradition? How do we prepare our kids for the time that they're born into now? And then envision a future where, again, they're able to focus first and foremost on Christ, and all those other things fall into place.
I'm glad you're there doing what you're doing. Do you have any last thoughts for our audience?
I would say if you're looking to join the mission of Catholic education, we're always looking for good people. That is, these are challenging times. We're so fortunate that we have a more informed laity than ever before, with the resources, everything from the Augustine Institute to Exodus 90 to Word on Fire. We have a number of great organizations that really assist us as laity in our mission. We have wonderful priests, deacons, sisters, and chaplains that if we're working hand in hand for the sake of the mission, our Catholic schools will flourish as never before. There are challenges. We feel like we have to double down on who we are, because when we go out to the world, they're going to really push back on that in a very intentional and antagonistic way. And we've seen that in our schools. And whether it's social media and technology, really, really grabbing a hold of our kids, whether it's the bias of the media, whether it is the relativism that we're seeing in society, um, all of those things are such a distraction and a noise that it's hard for folks, whether they're educators or parents, to articulate the truth in a way that is attractive to our kids. So the more that we can focus on creating critical thinkers, those that understand how to read and write, and we shouldn't be afraid of the word indoctrinate, because our kids are indoctrinated day in and day out by something, and our job is to pass on the doctrine of the faith. So we need people that are not afraid to do that, that recognize that It's not all about us. If we till fertile soil, the very best we can do is set our kids up well to understand why it is what we believe and articulate that, and then the Holy Spirit can work on their hearts. But it's a difficult time to be in Catholic education. I think there's a lot of ideas of what Catholic education means, but there's also a really good group of leaders out there, great educators, good priests, religious, that are are seeking to be there for parents to help form them in faith.
Beautiful words. Thank you, Dr. Monroe.
Thanks for being with me today. Do you have any questions for me? Any others?
Man, there's so many, honestly. I mean, I wonder how you protect your kids from digital destruction. That's one of the topics that I speak on because I see the importance of it. And schools have such a big influence on it. Parents don't give their kids a phone, a smartphone, and then the kid ruins them by requiring technology.
I love the book, The Anxious Generation. I think that's a fantastic book and resource. We've now had 3 parent formation nights with our parents. My kids are young, and it's one of those where as they get older, we're going to keep digital devices out of their hands as long as possible. Because again, we're supposed to protect our kids in our homes. And if you bring some of those devices into the home and they're not regulated, you've just opened the door to a lot of bad actors that don't have the best intentions of our kids in mind. And plus, all the brain research on there, right, about um, just attention spans and loss of critical thinking and inability to deep read text that's on a screen. There's so many research articles that have come out where, in fact, we're looking at the pendulum swinging. So the early 2000s, everybody had to have a device because it was going to be the panacea that was going to change education for the better across the board. Even in Catholic schools, it was, we have to go one-to-one with devices. And as we saw during COVID, where in-person education was far superior, we kept our schools in person because we saw
Good
that
for
was
you.
best for our
Good
kids.
for you. That says a lot right there.
Yeah. Well, it was an easy choice when we saw we are a community of faith, and if we can't pray together in person, we can't learn together in person, then what we are doing is not that community of faith that we espouse to provide to our parents.
Well, it's funny how rare that common sense is, or was, still is.
I think a lot of people have seen the fruits of those schools that kept their kids in person during COVID. Now everyone, all the researchers are saying, "Oh yeah, that was a better better route to take," even though at the time you were getting attacked on all sides for being reckless or doing some things that folks felt were not safe in the world's eyes. But um, we got through that okay, and now the conversation is okay. Well, what does this mean for technology? As Chat GPT continues to be prevalent, how do we ensure that we aren't getting swept up in the shiny object and recognizing that technology itself, yes, is a tool, but in many instances, it's not just a neutral tool, right? It's a detrimental tool because the kids are now products of large companies that are pushing propaganda or other things or finding ways for those dopamine hits so that they stay addicted to their screens longer and longer. So how do we push past that in our school? So we actively have committees working on this. We've removed phones from our schools, and so we've
Good.
recognized that it doesn't help, and actively harms our kids when they get that prodding where they have to check their notifications every few minutes or use it
So
as a
no
crutch.
phones during school hours.
That's correct.
Excellent. Excellent. And no mandatory devices.
We do have mandatory devices, but it's something that we're looking at. When I came into this system, we had a one-to-one program for the high schoolers, for some of the middle schools. And so again, as more and more research comes out, it's allowing us opportunity to relook at that and say, okay, what is best for the kids, both now and in the future? How do we prepare them well for the future, but ensure that we don't have distractions here in the present that would take away from the things our teachers are trying to do with them in the classroom?
Well, I understand that you inherited a deeply flawed system there. Um, But really, I mean, isn't this just common sense? I just it baffles my mind how someone could have so little understanding of human nature and child nature as to require technology for a child in a classroom. I mean, clearly, I mean, either they're incredibly naive, which I don't put it past them, because maybe these people didn't have technology growing up, or it's just like perfidious, which I don't think that's the reason. But people with common sense like you know, uh, I mean, they have to take the hit and make a change for the good of these kids, right?
Well, I definitely think we need to figure out how do we prepare our kids well, give them the tools they need to be successful. Unfortunately, we're in a technological age. So it's how do we prepare them again without distracting from the mission? And so um, it is unfortunate if you walk around and you see kids that are glued to their screens, and that is more engaging than what they think is happening in the classroom. So, how can we do more Socratic dialogue? How can we focus back on physical books? How can we, part of the reason that our schools felt compelled to move to digital devices was because so many publishers moved to digital subscriptions. It was a money thing. And so, um, we're trying to work with publishers that have physical textbooks
Good.
because that way you're not beholden to some company that puts you on the hook for renewing those subscriptions year over year, and you never know if they change something that online, something that might be woke
Mhm.
or something
Yeah,
anti-Catholic or not aligned with our faith. So yeah, we there's a real opportunity here, especially as Catholic schools, to step into this and say, what are the tried and true methods of education? What in our tradition allows us to understand human nature in a very fundamental way? And how do we lean into that in order to prepare our kids for both the present and the future? And I know we've got great educators doing that across the US. Um, and I think we'll continue to see as more and more brain research comes out, I think we'll continue to see people recognizing that uh, if something doesn't change with technology access, then it's going to be harmful to our kids in the long run.
so I'm curious, what do you think would happen if you just said, okay, next year, no school in my diocese is going to require a device. In fact, devices like personal devices are banned in every school.
I think there'd be initial shock because of how ingrained we've been with these devices. I mean, the good thing with the church and her wisdom is she recognizes that cultural change can't happen immediately. There has to be an understanding of why we're doing something. If I were to make that change right now, I think there'd be a visceral reaction. And I think the why would get lost in the emotion. So I think what it would require for any school looking at doing this is a long runway of here's what we're doing, here's why. Let's have some parent formation nights as to why the research and the anecdotal experience of our educators is leaning in this direction. And if you do all of that, even if people don't agree, at least they'll say, okay, we were given a heads up, we could opt out, and oh, these people do know what they're talking about. You and I understand as educators some of these instinctively, but when society runs on devices and technology, when parents themselves, you go to a park and everyone's looking at their phones or they're in their office on their devices, they didn't grow up with technology. So they don't understand the harmful effects of being raised alongside it. And some of the harm that we're seeing it do to our kids who are raised on it from 6 months, a year old, 2 years old. Does that answer your question? I would want to make sure that any change that we put into place that we gave parents the dignity and the respect to articulate why we're doing something versus making an immediate knee jerk reaction. Now, it also would require our educators, so we have 650 teachers, we'd also have to work with them on training them on how do we get back to basics on some things? How do we refocus on the handwriting? How do we refocus on um, helping our kids look at primary sources? How do we understand that the cross-curricular integration of subject matter needs to be primary? How do we sit down and have a good dialogue where students have to articulate their position versus just pasting a question into Google? How do we facilitate the unlocking of knowledge versus telling kids to just go research it online.
Yeah, I just wonder the runway you described to change it back to common sense. Was such a runway implemented when these devices were introduced? Did they have studies showing the great benefits of technology in the classroom? Did they have meetings with parents saying that we're going to do this? Did they allow parents to opt out of it? Did they take the parents' input into consideration?
Yes, I know it was suddenly here. I mean,
That's what
even
I'm saying,
yeah,
man. That's what I'm saying. So there's this for the introduction of the evil. All it's sudden. You're talking about the church having slow cultural change, but the introduction of the evil was sudden. But then the medicine is going to be gradual. Why is it? I mean, if it's a crisis situation. Uh, I mean,
yeah.
it's like triage.
Unfortunately,
Like let's get the person off the battlefield.
I think the challenge you have is that those things which aren't harmful to our kids are inherently attractive.
Yeah,
And
that's
there
right.
there is there is a desire there that, we know that, for taking Thomistic philosophy, we're saying, okay, the middle path, the path of prudence, that path of moderation, that's not always a path that people easily gravitate towards, due to our fallen nature. And so
Yeah, the
so I
opposite.
do think that things that are harmful, those do get their hooks into people, and it does take longer to reverse that. And I mean, we see that with even in the Gospels. We talk about certain things that have latched on to humankind can only be reversed through fasting and prayer. It's not an immediate reversal of something. So I think that even if there's not a desire to do that, I think people would recognize very quickly that, wow, these things aren't the be all end all. I think people would recognize that. But again, part of my job is to ensure that any changes that are implemented, that the good fruits of that aren't overshadowed too much by the noise and the emotion that would be caused by the immediate reversal. I think it can certainly be done in different places, but part of the challenge in my position is we work with thousands of parents, dozens of schools. And so, what could be done on a classroom level or in a school level where that trust is built up, you have to affect that change in a slower way necessarily just because of the scale of some of the larger groups that we're working with.
So, what timeline are you thinking?
So, we have a couple of parents pulling together some of the research on what technology looks like in our schools. We have parent principal committee as well looking at this. Our office is also looking into it. So again, something that is as massive as looking at pushing back on some of the technology integration for the good of our students' learning, something like that. I don't have a distinct timeline on that, but I know that we're having those conversations this spring to look at, okay, what would that rollout look like? So don't have answers right here, right now for you, but um, I don't think we're the only diocese having that sort of conversation.
Oh, I'm
And I know we're
sure.
not the
Yeah.
only school that is having that too.
Yeah. I think we're talking about two different things because it seems like what you're talking about is how to change people's habits, how to instruct them in moral virtue. And that, yeah, that does take time. But what I'm more talking about is how to remove um, a proximate cause of grave sin. And that is irrespective of the person's choice. It's like, I can't force someone to stop drinking excessively, but I can choose not to provide a whiskey bar at my AA meeting. So, I mean, the reality is these devices are proximate causes of grave sin that can persist for decades and destroy their hopes for happiness in this life and the next. So, and I think the first role of the protector is just to remove the pernicious influence, right? And then we can guide the soul to freely choose the good, which of course will be the goal.
And like I said, from a scale perspective, especially in my position, again, I have to speak with the mind of the bishop and then also work with a number of pastors too through this. And that those sorts of conversations necessarily require a larger conversation. And just to speak from personal experience, we need to have that research alongside of which, again, there is a lot of good research out there about the effects of technology. Um, so I think we're actually looking at both tracks. It's one, how do you affect people's habits? How do you continue to build up a culture of virtue? And then concurrently, looking at the contracts we have in place, the procurement we have in place, working with those pastors, a bishop to affect larger scale on a physical side. I think that there's that as well. But also, I would say the third strand is how do we also help form our parents? Because even if we move in a different direction with devices in our schools, those kids still have access to devices at home and on the weekends. And as I mentioned before, part of our job is to work alongside those parents. So how do we help guide them as well? We have good parents in our school system, but I think more so than ever in the past, our parents in our schools are pretty lockstep in different things. And now, in many ways, we're having to be an assist and a formation junction for parents as well, who may not have had example from their parents or guidance from uh, the friend groups that they were in on how do you form your children with the highest and best things in mind. Again, I that's a blanket statement, but it's something that we've recognized with our folks, and parents are asking us for that. What do I do when it comes to technology and social media? How do I uh I didn't get the best catechesis growing up, so how am I supposed to articulate the faith to our kids? And so those are the things that Catholic schools maybe didn't do in the past, or maybe even saw as a need in the past, but we definitely see it as a need now. So how do we work with our pastors to do that? Because like I said, there's multiple strands here. There's no magic bullet, but if we're hitting multiple things, we can lead to true cultural change. It just does change the timeline a little bit.
Yeah. In terms of resources to explain to parents and to administrators the benefits of uh, fewer digital distractions, have you seen the phone free school movement or some of the resources from Screen Strong? Because they provide templates that you can share with these people.
You could share those with me. That'd be
Yeah,
fantastic.
definitely.
We've seen some, there's some other like secular organizations such as Wait Until 8, where they try to get parents to sign on to keeping phones out of kids' hands at least until 8th grade. We think it should be longer, but yeah, there are organizations out there. But yeah, any resources you had, I think, would be fantastic.
Okay, will do. Yeah, I've interviewed some of those people. They've done the work to save people in your position that trouble. And if you ever need a base psychologist who's willing to tell the parents the truth about digital destruction, call me up. I'm actually going to be in your area. I'll be speaking in Raleigh in late March on this topic, actually, at the Converging
Who's
Roads
the audience?
conference. Do you know Converging Roads? It's from the St. John Paul II Institute.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Are you coming to a parish or is the diocese bringing you in?
It's going to be at St. Patrick's Cathedral.
Well, maybe that's a sidebar conversation on the side because we are, it's one thing if we say certain things, but when we have experts in the space of psychology from a Catholic perspective, that's really helpful.
Sure, I'm on your side, man, and I'm willing to take the hit. I'm willing to be the bad cop, which I understand that in your position you can't. I mean, you don't call all the shots. You're working with the bishop and others, and you're a very prudent, measured person, unlike myself. So it's good. It's also good to have normal people like you. But if you need someone to go in there and disrupt things, that's me.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions I can answer for you in our remaining time?
I think that covers it. I want to jump into the sidebar. But thanks for coming on. I appreciate it, and I appreciate what you do. It really is genuinely encouraging to know that there's someone as well educated, articulate, well visioned as yourself, with decades more of service to come, given how young you look.
Yeah, well, we've got a good support network. We've got some great folks in our diocese, and then nationwide, there's an excellent network of folks that connect regularly and resource each other. So uh, we're moving in a good direction. There's still a lot of challenges out there, but we can take the very best of who our schools are and our tradition, and as long as we keep the mission at the center, we'll do okay.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dr. Greg.
All right, great talking to you. Hope you have a good rest of the week.